I hope they focus on what they have to focus on, which is the next year and a half or so of crucial policy. There are some big issues that have to be addressed. Obviously, the size of the U.S. troop presence at any given moment in time. We know we're headed down towards a much more modest number by the end of 2014 when the current mission officially ends and then would presumably be replaced by a new mission. But we don't know the pacing of the drawdown, whether General Allen, who has reportedly been asking for staying near the current number of troops, will get his way, or if there'll be a gradual drawdown or a steep cut right away, and just how the strategy will be altered. And obviously that's a big piece of the military discussion. There's also the question of how the United States and other outside countries can help Afghanistan get ready for their presidential elections next year. We have a very difficult past between the two countries on this subject. The last elections, when Karzai won his second term in 2009, were associated with a lot of acrimony and a lot of disagreement between the two countries. Karzai thinks that we were sort of rooting against him and trying to reduce the legitimacy and the importance of his victory and trying to discredit him in some ways. That was his impression. We were more interested in making sure that democracy really worked, and most Americans didn't really think there was a viable alternative to Karzai anyway, because he was popular and still is. So there was this difference of perspective which has continued to poison the waters. And we've got to figure out a way that we can be helpful enough that we and other outside countries feel some confidence in the result. Because if we don't feel confidence in the result, even if the Afghans muddle through the election itself, if we wind up with an Afghan president who is not particularly legitimate or not particularly law-abiding, then it's going to be very hard to sustain the kind of promises that we're offering to the Afghans in terms of money, security assistance, economic development, American troops. The president obviously recognizes this war as part of his legacy. You know, he said this was a war we had to fight. He always contrasted this with the Iraq War, and this was the one that was smart and necessary. And the president's now been in office for 4 years, and so the way in which this war has gone and where it winds up will be very much his responsibility. Commanders in the field have come and gone. Secretaries of Defense have now come and gone. It's the president who's been the constant presence for 4 years. So I wouldn't be so quick as to assume that he's trying to somehow negotiate a faster American drawdown. What he really wants is, sure, a minimal presence for what our objectives need to be, but he wants those objectives to be accomplished. And he feels this is important for our security, and he's commander-in-chief. So I wouldn't presuppose that the president has committed to a certain preferred path. As for President Karzai, I also would not presuppose anything there, because President Karzai, even though he knows at one level he needs our help, he's also sort of tired of depending on us. He is a man who's been in office now for a decade. When you speak to him, you see a man who has grown weary of having to fight a war for that period of time. And it's understandable. Every day he's got to worry about his personal security. Every day he hears stories about his countrymen suffering from the violence. Every day he wonders why we can't do better with our coalition against this ragtag insurgency. And there's a part of him that would welcome a more rapid American departure. Even though it may not be a smart move, there's a big part of his emotional makeup that I think would like to see us leave fairly quickly. And that leads to the other point, which is he may not give our troops immunity from the Afghan legal system after 2014. And if he refuses that kind of immunity, just like the Iraqis did a couple of years ago, we may leave Afghanistan just like we left Iraq. And that's where General Barnow's point, I think, is well taken. There's a chance that President Karzai believes we desperately want those bases for our broader regional aspirations. With all due respect to Afghan friends, Afghanistan is not in a strategic location, with the one exception that we do have an interest, obviously, in being able to go after terrorists in Afghanistan and Pakistan who could otherwise threaten us. That part of our interest remains. That's why we're in Afghanistan in the first place. But the idea that we care about being near Russia or China or Iran from that particular location is not true. And we would be willing, I think, to leave if necessary, rather than accept a bad legal arrangement for our forces. So I hope President Karzai doesn't overplay his hand in that regard.